Alone, pregnant, and on the edge of despair, she fled through the forest, unaware she was being hunted by eyes as dangerous as they were seductive. The sound of invisible footsteps pursued her through thunder and darkness, and when the truth was revealed, it was too late to escape. If intense and unexpected love stories like this touch your heart, subscribe to our channel and comment what you thought. Every day we post new plots that move and surprise. Discover now the romance that no one dared to live. The Montana sky looked like an open wound on that night when Emily Winters fled into the woods. Lightning cut through the darkness in silver veins. The air was heavy with the smell of approaching rain, and each of her breaths came with the taste of blood and fear in her mouth. The white party dress, once a symbol of her privileged status in Bozeman's high society, was now torn, soiled with red mud, and stained by blood flowing from a deep cut on her leg. 7 months pregnant, Emily ran because there was no other choice. The baby in her womb weighed like a dangerous secret, an affront to everything society expected of her, and worse still, a constant reminder of the man her father hated most. That morning, the Winters patriarch had learned of the pregnancy and lost any trace of humanity. For him, that bastard child wasn't just a family scandal. It was a concrete threat to the empire he had built with blood and sweat in Montana's ranching business. A mixed-race heir would taint his lineage and destroy his plans to unite properties through his daughter's forced marriage to the son of a cattle magnate. So he paid gunmen to bring Emily back, alive but obedient, and didn't bother to clarify what they should do if they didn't find her docile. But what even he didn't suspect was who the child's father really was. Months earlier, during a tense meeting about land boundaries with representatives from a neighboring Native American reservation, Emily had met Lakota. He wasn't just a representative, but the son of the reservation's last great spiritual leader, a man whose presence seemed shaped by the land itself. Eyes as dark as a moonless night, the erect posture of a warrior who carried the weight of an entire people's past on his shoulders, and a wild magnetism that affected her immediately and brutally. Emily had been instructed to be cordial, cold, diplomatic, but failed. A lingering touch when passing him a glass of water, holding his gaze longer than necessary. And that same night, in secret, Emily had given herself to him in a clearing behind the ranch house, amidst the heat of bonfires and the distant sound of drums. It had been just one night, but enough to mark them both forever. She had returned home full of regret and unresolved desire. He, in turn, had disappeared into the wilderness, convinced he would never see her again. But on that rainy night, as Emily limped through the Montana wilderness, he was there. Lakota watched her every step like someone monitoring a wounded animal about to collapse. He had followed her since seeing her being dragged into the woods by the gunmen. He had already eliminated them one by one, silently, leaving them unconscious in the shadows to avoid bringing more violence to his community. But now he needed to decide: help her or leave her to the fate she had created for herself. Why had she returned to these lands? Why did she carry his seed in her womb and yet walked alone, so fragile and so proud? When she finally collapsed near a stream, Lakota didn't hesitate. He emerged from the shadows and lifted her in his arms, feeling her trembling against his bare chest, the smell of fear and desire mixing with the rain that began to fall. Emily tried to fight, shouted insults, but the truth was that she didn't want to push him away. She couldn't deny to herself that she still felt that insane heat for him, that need that bordered on physical pain. "Let me go," she shouted, but her hands clung to his arms as if her life depended on it. "You have no right to—" "I have every right," he answered, his husky voice cutting through the rain that began to fall. "You're carrying my child." His words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Emily tried to deny it, but the tears that rolled down her face betrayed any attempt at lying. Lakota knew her too well, could read every micro-expression on her face, every tremor in her voice. They took refuge in a nearby cave, a natural shelter among the Montana rocks that he had known since childhood. There, the first significant moment unfolded. By the flickering light of an improvised fire, Lakota tore the rest of her dress to clean the wound and bandage it with strips of fabric. His fingers on her skin were firm, but each touch lingered a second longer than necessary. The silence between them was heavy, dense, full of unspoken words and repressed desires. "Why didn't you look for me?" Emily whispered, finally breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with hurt, months of loneliness and fear. "When I discovered I was pregnant, you had already disappeared. I thought I meant nothing to you." Lakota stopped working on the bandage and looked directly at her. His eyes shone with an intensity she remembered well from that fateful night. "You think it was easy for me? You think I haven't thought about you every day since then? Then why?" "Because I knew this would happen," he exploded, moving away from her abruptly. "I knew that if I stayed, if I tried anything, your father would do everything to destroy my community. You have no idea what it's like to live in constant fear, Emily. You don't know what it's like to see your family threatened because of a moment of weakness." "Weakness?" The word came out like a slap. Emily stood up, ignoring the pain in her leg, and went to him. "Is that what that night was to you? Weakness?" Lakota pushed her against the cold wall of the cave, bringing his lips to her neck without quite kissing her, letting his hot breath run over her skin as he said in a husky voice, "You don't understand, woman. You don't understand what you did to me." "Then explain it to me," she murmured, her hands rising to his bare chest, feeling his racing heart beneath the warm skin. "You took away my sleep, Emily. You took away my peace. Every day I wake up thinking about your smell, your taste, the way you sighed when I—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. When their lips finally met, it was like lightning, a long, fierce kiss, made of guilt and accumulated desire. His hands got lost in her blonde hair, pulling her closer, while she clung to him as if he were the only fixed point in a crumbling world. "I tried to forget you," he confessed against her lips, his voice broken. "God knows I tried. But you were here." He brought his hand to his chest, burning inside like fire and dry brush. "I tried too," she admitted, tears mixing with the kiss. "But every time I closed my eyes, you were there. Every time another man touched me, I could only think of you." Her confession about other men awakened something primitive in Lakota. He held her by the arms, his eyes burning with jealousy and possessiveness. "How many?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "That doesn't matter now." "Yes, it does. How many, Emily?" "Two," she whispered, seeing his jaw tighten. "Two men my father introduced me to. Two men I tried to love but couldn't, because you had ruined everything for me." Lakota closed his eyes, fighting against the jealousy consuming him. When he opened them again, there was something different in them, a decision being made, a line being crossed. "Never again," he said, his voice laden with promise and threat. "Never again will another man touch you. Never again will you need to pretend you're not mine." And that same night, they gave themselves to each other once more, on improvised bedding of animal skins, in a visceral, sensual love that made them forget for an instant the world outside the cave. But this time it was different. There was an urgency, a farewell in the air. Both knew this could be the last time. When dawn broke, Emily awoke in his arms, the baby kicking gently in her belly, as if also recognizing its father's presence. Lakota was awake, his eyes fixed on the cave ceiling, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "I'm thinking that your father won't give up," he replied, without averting his gaze. "I'm thinking that the longer you stay with me, the more dangerous it becomes for all of us." "So you're going to abandon me again?" "No," he said, finally looking at her. "Not this time, but we need to find a solution. We can't run forever." "We can try," she whispered, nestling closer against him. "We can disappear, change our names, go to another state, and live as fugitives forever. And our child?" What kind of life would that be for him? Emily knew he was right, but didn't want to admit it. Reality was too cruel to accept. They had been doomed from the start. She, the daughter of Montana's most powerful rancher, and he, the leader of a Native American community fighting for its own survival. But at that moment, with the golden morning light filtering through the cave entrance, with the warmth of his body against hers and the life growing inside her, Emily allowed herself to dream that perhaps, just maybe, love would be enough. She was wrong. Outside, the sound of horses' hooves echoed among the Montana rocks. The gunmen had found their trail, and this time, they weren't coming alone. Lakota jumped up, every muscle tense, already reaching for the knife he always carried at his waist. Emily covered herself with the cloths, her heart racing, knowing that their small bubble of happiness was about to burst. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Many," he replied, without taking his eyes off the cave entrance. "Too many." And then a familiar voice echoed from outside, a voice that made Emily's blood freeze in her veins. "Emily, I know you're in there. Come out now, and we can still resolve this as a family." It was her father. Colonel Winters had come personally to fetch her, and for the first time since she had fled, Emily felt true terror. Colonel Winters' voice echoed through the cave like distant thunder, laden with all the authority that a man accustomed to being obeyed without question could muster. Emily felt the baby move restlessly in her womb, as if the child itself could sense the approaching danger. Lakota remained motionless for a few seconds, calculating the options, his gaze fixed on the cave entrance where the sunlight formed a golden rectangle that seemed increasingly like a trap. "Emily," the voice sounded again, more impatient. "Don't make me come in there and get you. You know I didn't come alone." As if to confirm her father's words, the sound of heavy boots echoed from outside, followed by the clink of metal against metal, weapons being prepared, belts being adjusted, men positioning themselves for a confrontation. Emily counted mentally. At least 6 men, maybe more. All armed, all willing to do anything for money. "He brought an army," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "My own father brought an army to hunt me down as if I were an animal." Lakota turned to her, his eyes burning with an intensity she had never seen before. There was something different about him at that moment, an iron determination, an acceptance of the inevitable that made her understand he had already made a decision. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you," he said, approaching her and holding her face with both hands. "Whatever happens, you're not leaving here with me. You're leaving here alive, with our child, and you're going to find a way to be happy." "No," she shook her head desperately. "No, I won't let you die because of me. I've caused enough suffering already." "You haven't caused anything," he said, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that contrasted with the hardness in his eyes. "You gave me the most precious thing I could have, a child. And now it's my turn to protect both of you." Before Emily could protest, Lakota was already moving. He quickly put on his pants, grabbed his knife, and headed for the cave entrance. But he didn't go out. Instead, he positioned himself so he could see what was happening outside without being seen. "Colonel!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the rocks. "Colonel Winters, I presume. I'm Lakota from the Red Ridge Reservation. I believe we have matters to resolve." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily could almost hear her father processing the information, connecting the dots, finally understanding who the man was who had corrupted his daughter. When he spoke again, his voice carried a venom she knew well, the same tone he used when speaking of the invaders who threatened his lands. "So it's you," Colonel Winters said, and there was a sinister satisfaction in his voice. "The shaman's son. I should have known one of your kind would try to take advantage of the situation." Emily felt anger explode in her chest. Even in that situation, even with everyone's lives at risk, her father couldn't set aside his prejudices. She stood up, ignoring the pain in her leg, and walked to where Lakota was standing. "It's not like that, father," she shouted, appearing at the cave entrance. "He didn't take advantage of anything. It was I who—" "Shut up, Emily," the colonel roared, and she could see anger contorting his face. "You've already brought enough shame to our family. Now you're going to come home. You're going to marry who I choose, and we're going to deal with this situation." "What situation?" Emily asked, but she already knew the answer. The cold that spread through her chest confirmed her worst fears. "You'll have this child far away from here, somewhere discreet. Then we'll give it to a family that knows how to raise it properly, and you'll return home as if nothing happened." "Never!" Emily shouted, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. "I will never give up my child." "Our child," Lakota corrected, stepping forward. "And he's right, Colonel. We will never give up our child." Colonel Winters' laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "We? You think you have any right to this child? You think I'll allow a grandchild of mine to be raised in a community of rebellious Indians? "This community of rebellious Indians has more dignity than you'll ever have," Lakota replied, and Emily saw the muscles in his back contract. "And our son will grow up knowing what honor is, something you clearly don't know." The silence that followed was charged with an almost palpable tension. Emily could feel the violence accumulating in the air like electricity before a storm. Her father had never been challenged like that, had never had his authority questioned by someone he considered inferior. "Dawson!" the colonel shouted, and Emily recognized the name of her father's most dangerous henchman. "You and the others get in there and bring my daughter. Kill the other one." "No!" Emily screamed, but Lakota had already pushed her behind him, protecting her with his own body. "Is there another way out of this cave?" he asked quickly, without taking his eyes off the entrance. "Not that I know of," she replied, desperation taking over her voice. "Then we'll have to make our own path." The first men appeared at the cave entrance, weapons in hand, moving with the confidence of those who knew they had numerical superiority. But they didn't count on Lakota's knowledge of the terrain, nor on the desperation of a man who had nothing more to lose. The first attacker barely had time to process what happened. Lakota moved like a ghost, appearing beside the man before he could react. The knife found its target with surgical precision, and the gunman collapsed without a sound. The second man managed to give a warning cry before also falling, but it was too late. The element of surprise had been lost. "Son of a bitch!" someone shouted outside. "He killed Joe and Charlie." "Then stop playing around and kill that bastard already." The colonel's voice cut through the air like a whip. Emily watched everything as if in a nightmare. The violence she had grown up hearing about, but never witnessed, was happening right in front of her. And the cause of it all was her. Her love for Lakota, her decision to give herself to him, her pregnancy. Everything had led to this moment of blood and chaos. "I need to surrender," she said, approaching Lakota. "I can't let you die because of me." "Don't even think about it," he replied, cleaning the knife on his pants. "You surrender to him now, you and our child are dead. He'll never forgive the humiliation." "But, no buts. We're either leaving here together or we're not leaving." More men appeared at the entrance, this time more cautious. They knew they were facing someone dangerous, someone who knew every inch of this place. Lakota moved again, but this time the attackers were prepared. A shot echoed through the cave, and he threw himself to the ground, pulling Emily with him. "You're all incompetent," the colonel shouted outside. "There are 6 armed men against a savage with a knife." "He knows the cave, Colonel," one of the men replied. "We can't see properly in here." "Then set fire to this place, smoke them out." Emily felt her blood freeze. Her father was willing to kill her if necessary. For him, it was better to have a dead daughter than a daughter who had mixed with the rabble. The realization of her own father's coldness hit her like a punch to the stomach. "He's not bluffing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He'll really set fire to this place." "Then we have to get out," Lakota said, looking around the cave for some alternative. "There has to be another way." It was then that Emily remembered. When she was a child, she and the ranch employees' children used to play in these caves. There was a narrow passage at the back, almost invisible, that led to a ravine on the other side of the hill. She had completely forgotten, but now the memory came back with crystal clarity. "There is," she said, standing up. "At the back of the cave, there's a passage. It's narrow, but we can get through." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I used to play here when I was a child." Lakota looked at her, then at the cave entrance where her father's men were preparing for the final attack. The decision was quick. "Let's go," he said, taking her hand. "But if it's a trap, if it's a dead end, we'll die here." "I'd rather die trying than surrender to him," Emily replied, and there was a determination in her voice that surprised them both. They moved to the back of the cave, where the shadows were denser. Emily searched with her hands until she found the crack in the wall. It was smaller than she remembered, but perhaps enough. Lakota tested the opening, and to his surprise, he managed to pass through. "Go," he said, helping her squeeze through the passage. "I'll follow you." Outside, the shouts of the colonel's men intensified. They had gathered dry branches and were trying to make a fire at the cave entrance. Smoke began to spread through the environment, making breathing difficult. Emily managed to pass through the crack, scratching her arms on the rough stones, but finally emerged on the other side. Lakota followed her, and when they exited the passage, They found themselves in a small hidden ravine, far from the pursuers' eyes. "It worked," she said, almost unable to believe it. "It really worked." "Not yet," Lakota replied, looking around. "They'll discover we're not in there in a few minutes. We need to put distance between us and them." But when they turned to leave, Emily stumbled. The pain in her injured leg, combined with the effort of passing through the crack, was too much. She fell to her knees, breathing heavily. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't go on." Lakota knelt beside her, seeing the blood that had returned to stain the improvised bandage. The wound had reopened, and she was losing blood. Moreover, the stress of the situation was affecting the pregnancy. She was having contractions. "The baby," she whispered, her hands on her belly. "Something's happening to the baby." It was then that they heard the shouts coming from the cave. The colonel's men had discovered the passage. It wouldn't take them long to find them. Lakota looked at Emily, then at the trail that led away from there. He knew that carrying her in his arms, he couldn't maintain the speed needed to escape. But he also knew he couldn't abandon her. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, his voice laden with a difficult decision. "My community isn't far from here. If we can get there, they'll protect us." "Your community?" Emily asked, confused by the pain. "But you said you couldn't put them in danger." "I changed my mind," he replied, lifting her in his arms. "Sometimes some things are worth fighting for." And so, carrying the woman he loved and the child not yet born, Lakota began to run along the trail that led to Red Ridge. Behind them, the shouts of the pursuers echoed among the Montana rocks. But ahead, the hope of a future still shone like a distant star. But Emily didn't know that arriving at the community, she would face a new kind of challenge. The reservation wouldn't welcome with open arms the daughter of the man who had spent decades trying to expel them from their lands, and some believed that protecting her would be the same as signing the death warrant for the entire community. The sun was setting when they finally spotted the first houses of Red Ridge, and Emily realized that her fight for acceptance was just beginning. Red Ridge rose against the orange sunset sky like a natural fortress. Its adobe and wooden houses scattered across the slope in a pattern that followed the land's topography more than any urban planning. Smoke rose from chimneys, children played among the fruit trees, and the sound of drums echoed softly through the air, a community that breathed life and resistance in every corner. But when Lakota appeared carrying Emily in his arms, the sound of the drums abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was charged with tension and distrust. Women gathered the children inside, men emerged from the shadows with hard expressions, and Emily felt the weight of dozens of gazes upon her, some curious, others clearly hostile. She recognized some faces from the land boundary meetings, people whom her father had publicly humiliated, threatened, and tried to expel from their homes. "Lakota," a female voice broke the silence. "What have you done?" Emily turned her head and saw a woman approaching, tall, with gleaming dark skin and eyes that burned with intelligence and authority. Her hair was tied in elaborate braids adorned with colorful beads, and she wore a white dress that made her look like both a queen and a priestess. Even in her weakened condition, Emily could feel the power emanating from that woman. "Elder Sarah," Lakota said, stopping before her. There was deep respect in his voice, but also determination. "She needs help. The baby is coming." The woman, Emily realized she must be the community's spiritual leader, approached and examined her with experienced eyes. Her hands touched Emily's forehead, checked her pulse, gently palpated the belly where the baby moved restlessly. "She's in premature labor," Elder Sarah said, her voice laden with professional concern. The stress, the escape, the wound on her leg, all of this forced her body. "We need to take her to a safe place." "No," a male voice intervened. A robust man with a graying beard and scars on his hands that spoke of a life of hard work approached the group. "We will not shelter Colonel Winter's daughter. That will bring war to our community." "Marcus," Lakota began, but the man interrupted him. "No, Lakota, you've lost your mind. This woman is the daughter of the man who tried to expel us 3 times, of the man who ordered our crops burned last year, of the man who is now the grandfather of my child," Lakota said, his voice cutting. "The child she's carrying is mine, Marcus. It's our blood." A murmur of surprise ran through the crowd that had formed around them. Emily felt her cheeks burn with shame and defiance. She knew she was being judged, weighed on a scale where her surname carried the weight of decades of oppression. "That changes nothing," Marcus insisted. "If the colonel discovers she's here, he'll use that as an excuse to attack us. How many people will die because of this? And how many people have already died because of silence?" A new voice joined the discussion. Emily looked and saw a young woman, perhaps her age, with firm eyes and clenched fists. "How many times will we hide? Will we accept that our children cannot love who they want to love?" "Maya is right," Elder Sarah said, and her voice carried an authority that made everyone fall silent. "There are moments when running is no longer an option. There are moments when we need to make a choice." "And what choice is that?" Marcus asked, but Emily could see that his resistance was wavering before the spiritual leader's authority. "The choice between fear and dignity," Elder Sarah replied. "The choice between continuing to live like cornered animals or beginning to live as human beings who deserve respect." Emily tried to speak, tried to say she didn't want to bring them problems, but a strong contraction hit her at that moment, making her groan in pain. The baby wasn't going to wait for political discussions. It wanted to be born, and it wanted to be born now. "Enough talk," Elder Sarah said, making a decision. "Lakota, take her to my house. Maya, go get boiling water and clean cloths. Marcus, organize the men to stand guard. If the colonel comes, we'll be prepared." Marcus tried to protest. "I have spoken," she said, and there was something in her voice that admitted no discussion. "This child will be born under our protection, and if anyone wants to harm her or the mother, they'll have to go through my dead body first." Lakota carried Emily to Elder Sarah's house, a simple but clean and welcoming construction, with the smell of medicinal herbs and aromatic candles. He laid her on a bed covered with immaculate white sheets, and Emily clung to his hand as if it were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. "Don't leave me," she whispered, fear showing in her voice. "Please don't leave me alone." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, kissing her forehead. "I'm here. Our child will be born knowing that his father is present." Elder Sarah entered the house with Maya and other women from the community. They moved with an efficiency that spoke of experience, preparing everything that would be necessary for the birth. Emily watched, fascinated despite the pain, as those women worked together. There was no hierarchy, no shouted orders, just a silent understanding and cooperation she had never seen among the women of Bozeman's high society. "First time?" Elder Sarah asked, examining Emily again. "Yes," Emily managed to reply between contractions that now came more frequently. "Don't worry, you are strong. And this boy—" "How do you know it's a boy?" Emily asked, surprised. Elder Sarah smiled, and for the first time her severe face softened. "The spirits told me. He will be a warrior, like his father, but he will also have his mother's stubbornness." Despite the pain, Emily found herself smiling. There was something about that woman's presence that reassured her, that made her feel that perhaps, just maybe, everything would be all right. But outside, the situation was far from under control. The men of the community had spread across the slope, watching all the trails that led to Red Ridge. They knew Colonel Winters wouldn't give up easily. And they were right. 2 hours after sunset, the first torches appeared on the main trail. The colonel had brought more men. Emily could hear the voices down below, counting at least a dozen horsemen, but this time he hadn't come only with gunmen. There were military police vehicles along with the horses, and she could hear her father's voice shouting orders. "They've surrounded the entire community," Marcus came to inform, entering the house where Emily was fighting against contractions. "There's police, gunmen, even an army officer. Your father isn't playing around." "How many?" Lakota asked without letting go of Emily's hand. 30, maybe 40 men. "They're demanding we hand her over, or they'll invade and search house by house." Emily tried to get up. "I need to surrender. I can't let you suffer because of me." "No way," Elder Sarah said, gently pushing her back to the bed. "This baby needs to be born, and you're not going anywhere until that happens." "But they'll invade." "Let them try," Maya said, and there was a fierce determination in her voice. "We're not the same Native Americans who used to hide when the cavalry appeared. Now we know our rights." "Rights?" Emily asked, confused by the pain. "Our land was officially recognized last year," Lakota explained. "Officially. Legally. They can't simply invade here." It would be a federal crime. You think that will stop my father? No, he admitted. But it will give us legal ammunition afterward, and it will make some of the police think twice before shooting. A particularly strong contraction hit Emily at that moment, making her scream. Elder Sarah positioned herself to check the progress of the birth and announced, "He's coming. A few more contractions and we'll see our warrior." Outside, Colonel Winter's voice echoed through the community, amplified by a megaphone. "Residents of Red Ridge, you are harboring a fugitive from justice. Hand over my daughter immediately, or we will come in there and take her by force." Fugitive from justice? Maya laughed bitterly. What crime did she commit? Falling in love? For men like him, that's crime enough, Marcus replied. Mixing blood is a crime. Disobeying your father is a crime. Being happy when they want you to be unhappy is a crime. Emily felt tears roll down her face, not just from physical pain, but from a deeper pain. The realization that her own family saw her as a criminal, as something that needed to be controlled and punished, hit her like a knife to the chest. "I can never go home," she whispered. "Even if we survive this, I can never go back." "Home isn't a place," Elder Sarah said, wiping the sweat from Emily's forehead. "Home is where you are loved for who you are, not for what others want you to be." "One more contraction," Maya announced, holding Emily's other hand. "Strength, warrior. Your son is almost here." And then, as if the universe had decided to synchronize drama and life, everything happened at once. Emily felt the final pressure, the irresistible urge to push, while outside the sound of warning shots echoed through the night. The colonel was losing patience. "Push," Elder Sarah commanded. "Now!" Emily pushed with all the strength she had, screaming with pain and determination. Lakota held her hand, whispering words of encouragement in her ear, while outside the chaos intensified. And then, between war cries and warning shots, between tears of pain and whispers of love, the baby was born. The child's first cry cut through the night like a declaration of existence, a cry of life that refused to be silenced by prejudice or violence. Elder Sarah lifted the baby, a boy, as she had predicted, and placed him on Emily's chest. "Welcome to the world, warrior," she said, smiling through tears. "You chose quite a night to be born." Emily looked at her son, Lakota's son, and felt a love so intense it left her breathless. He was perfect. The light brown skin that showed the mixture of their races, the dark straight hair like his father's, but the eyes, when he opened them for a moment, were blue like hers. "What shall we call him?" Lakota asked, gently touching his son's head. "River," Emily replied without hesitation. It was a name that had appeared in her dreams during pregnancy, a name that meant connection and life. "River Winters Blackhawk." "Winters Blackhawk?" Lakota asked, surprised. "He will carry the name of both worlds," Emily explained. "Your surname and mine, so that he never forgets where he came from." But the peace of the moment was interrupted when Marcus appeared again at the door, this time with a more serious face than before. "They're advancing," he announced. "They're no longer just threats. They're really going to invade. We have maybe 10 minutes before they get here." Emily looked at the baby in her arms, then at Lakota. "What do we do now?" "Now," Elder Sarah said, standing up and adjusting her white dress. "Now we show them what the people of Red Ridge are made of." She left the house with a determination that made everyone present understand that something had changed. The midwife had left, and the warrior leader had entered. Emily could hear her voice outside, speaking with the men of the community, organizing a defense that she knew would be more symbolic than effective. But that would be made anyway. "She's right," Lakota said, kissing Emily's forehead and then his son's. "The time has come to stop running. What if they kill us? Then we'll die together," he replied. "You, me, and our son. As a family." Emily looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, apparently unaware of the chaos surrounding him. River had been born in the storm, between love and violence, between two worlds that refused to accept his existence. But he was here. He was real. He was perfect. And as Emily held him against her chest, hearing the heavy footsteps of the invaders approaching up the slope, she made a decision that would change everything. No matter what happened, she would fight. For her son, for the man she loved, for the community that had welcomed her when her own family rejected her. The war was just beginning. The light from the invaders' torches danced on the walls of Elder Sarah's house like furious ghosts, creating shadows that seemed like omens of violence. Emily could hear the heavy boots approaching, the clink of weapons being prepared, the harsh voices of the men who had come to tear her away. River slept peacefully in her arms, apparently unaware of the fact that his first hour of life was being marked by a confrontation that could define it forever. Lakota positioned himself near the window, observing the movements outside. His expression was serene, but Emily knew that man well enough to see the storm forming in his eyes. He had made a decision, and she knew nothing in the world would make him back down. "How many can you see?" Emily asked, adjusting the baby against her chest. "Many," he replied, without averting his gaze. "But it's not the number that worries me, it's their determination. Your father didn't come here to negotiate." From outside, Colonel Winter's amplified voice echoed again through the community. "This is your last chance. Hand over my daughter or we'll come in there and take her. And if anyone tries to stop us, they'll answer for obstruction of justice." "Obstruction of justice," Maya spat, entering the house with her face contorted in anger. As if it were justice to invade a Native American reservation to kidnap a woman who chose her own life. "Where is Elder Sarah?" Lakota asked. "Outside, talking with the elders. They're deciding how to respond." Maya approached Emily and gently touched the baby's head. "He's beautiful. A perfect mix of you both." Emily smiled through tears. "Thank you for everything. You don't even know me, but you're risking your lives for me." "We do know you," Maya replied. "We know you through the way Lakota spoke your name during these months. We know you by the way you fight for this love, and we know you by the fact that you chose to stay here, even knowing what that meant." "I had no choice." "Yes, you did," Lakota interrupted, finally moving away from the window. "You could have gone home when you discovered you were pregnant. You could have lied about who the father was. You could have accepted the marriage your father arranged. But you didn't do any of that. Because I love you," Emily said simply, "and because I can no longer imagine a life pretending to be someone I'm not." The intimate moment was interrupted when Elder Sarah entered the house, followed by Marcus and other community leaders. There was something different in her posture, a determination that transcended fear, a dignity that refused to be broken. "We've made a decision," she announced. "We will not hand over Emily, and we will not allow them to invade our land." "Elder," Marcus began, clearly concerned, "there are many armed men. If we fight, people will die. If we don't fight, we die anyway," she replied. "Not physically, perhaps, but our dignity, our right to exist, our ability to protect our own, all that dies. And I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." "What if they brought the press?" Maya asked. "If this becomes a national scandal?" "Even better," Elder Sarah smiled, and there was something almost fierce in her expression. "Let the whole country see how a rancher treats a Native American community. Let everyone see what happens when a woman dares to love someone not chosen by her father." Emily felt a strange emotion grow in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something that took a few seconds to recognize as pride. For the first time in her life, she was surrounded by people who saw her not as property to be controlled, but as a human being with the right to make her own choices. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My father, he's not just stubborn, he's dangerous, and he has political connections. If this becomes a scandal, he'll find a way to legally destroy you." "Let him try," Elder Sarah replied. "We have connections too, and we also know how to play this game." "What connections?" "You're not the only person who fell in love outside their social class," Maya explained with a mysterious smile. "The governor's daughter also has her secrets, and the federal prosecutor's wife isn't as pure as she seems." Emily blinked, surprised. "You're blackmailing them?" "We're ensuring that the truth is heard," Elder Sarah corrected. "For a long time we've kept silences to protect powerful people. Perhaps it's time for some of those silences to be broken." It was then that the sound of a helicopter cut through the night. Emily felt her heart race. Her father had indeed brought all the forces he could gather. But when she looked out the window, she saw something she didn't expect. The helicopter wasn't military. It was from the press. "How?" she began to ask. "I said we had connections." Maya smiled. Reporter Amber Reed is my cousin, and she was waiting for my call. Outside, Colonel Winters clearly hadn't expected the press to arrive. Emily could hear his voice changing tone, becoming more diplomatic, more careful. The presence of cameras had completely changed the confrontation's dynamics. Now he can't just invade, Lakota observed, not with the cameras recording. Don't underestimate my father, Emily warned. He's smart. He'll find a way to make this look legal. And she was right. Minutes later, the colonel's amplified voice echoed again. As a concerned father, I just want to ensure my daughter is okay. She disappeared 2 days ago, is pregnant and injured. We just want to take her to receive proper medical care. Liar, Maya muttered. He's turning this into a public health issue. It's smart, Elder Sarah admitted. But we can play this game too. She left the house, and Emily saw her walking toward the cameras with the posture of a queen. When she began to speak, her voice carried all the authority of her years as the community's leader. My name is Sarah Blackhawk. I am the spiritual leader of this legally recognized Native American reservation. Young Emily is here of her own free will, received adequate medical care, and has just given birth to a healthy son. She is not being held against her will. She is being protected from domestic violence. The silence that followed was broken by River's sudden cry. Emily looked at her son, who had woken up as if he knew it was his time to make his entrance into the world. Without thinking twice, she rose from the bed, still trembling but determined, and walked to the door. Emily, no. Lakota tried to stop her. No, it's time, she said, her voice firm. It's time for me to speak for myself. She left the house carrying River, with Lakota at her side. The sight of a young white woman, clearly from the upper class, coming out of a simple house with a baby in her arms and a Native American man at her side, caused a stir among those present. The cameras immediately turned to her. Father, Emily said, her voice carrying across the slope. She didn't use the megaphone. She didn't need to. Her voice carried a strength that came from somewhere deep within her. Here is your daughter, alive, healthy, and with your grandson in her arms. Colonel Winters dismounted from his horse and approached, his face contorted between relief, anger, and embarrassment. Emily, daughter, you don't know what you're doing. These people have brainwashed you. Let's go home and talk about this calmly. No, she replied, and there was a serenity in her voice that surprised everyone, including herself. This is my home now. These are the people who welcomed me when you rejected me. This man, she held Lakota's hand, is the father of my son and the man I love. You don't know what you're saying. You're still confused from the birth. I've never been more lucid in my life. Emily interrupted him. For years you decided my life for me. Decided who I would marry. Decided where I would study. Decided even what clothes I would wear. But you cannot decide who I will love. The colonel stepped forward, the mask of paternal concern beginning to slip. You are my daughter. It's my responsibility to protect you from decisions that will ruin your life. The only thing that ruined my life was living as you wanted me to live, Emily replied, tears finally rolling down her face. Pretending to be happy with men I didn't love. Pretending to agree with your prejudiced ideas. Pretending I didn't see how you treated people like Lakota and his family. People like him are better than you will ever be, she said, her voice rising. He loves me for who I am, not for what I can bring to a business. He respects me, doesn't try to control me. And his community welcomed me when my own family hunted me down like an animal. The silence that followed was heavy. The cameras recorded everything. The community watched in tension. And Emily felt as if she were at a watershed, a moment that would define the rest of her life. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life, the colonel said, his voice low but laden with threat. The only mistake I made was taking so long to have the courage to be myself, Emily replied. But I won't make that mistake again. It was then that something unexpected happened. One of the police officers accompanying the colonel, a young woman in an impeccable uniform, stepped forward. Colonel Winters, she said, her voice official but firm. The lady is clearly here of her own will. She is of legal age, is not being held against her will, and no crime is being committed. There is no legal basis to force her to leave here. The colonel turned to her, his face red with anger. Officer, you're forgetting who— I'm not forgetting anything, sir. The police officer interrupted him. I'm upholding the law, and the law says this woman has the right to choose where she wants to live and with whom she wants to live. The unexpected support gave Emily a courage she didn't know she possessed. She moved closer, holding River with one hand and extending the other to her father. "Father," she said, her voice softer now, "you can choose. You can continue trying to control me and lose your daughter and grandson forever. Or you can accept that I've grown up, that I have the right to make my own choices, and you can be part of your grandson's life." For a moment, Emily saw something different in her father's eyes, perhaps a spark of the man who had taught her to ride a bicycle, who had told her stories to help her sleep when she was a child. But the spark quickly died out, replaced by the familiar hardness. "If you stay here, you are no longer my daughter," he said, his voice cutting. "If you choose them, you lose everything: inheritance, name, family, everything." Emily felt the tears increase, but her voice remained firm. "Then I choose love. I choose dignity. I choose to be happy, even if that means losing everything I thought was important." The colonel stared at her for a long moment, and Emily could see the internal struggle in his eyes. Part of him wanted to yield, wanted to accept, but pride, prejudice, and years of absolute control were stronger. "Then you've made your choice," he said finally, "and I've made mine." He turned and began walking back to the horses, but before mounting, he stopped and looked back one last time. "If you change your mind, if you need anything, you know where to find me." It was the closest to a reconciliation she would get from him at that moment, and Emily knew it. "I know, Father, and I hope that one day you'll change your mind too." The colonel mounted his horse and left, followed by his men. The police withdrew soon after, and the television cameras captured the last moments of the confrontation before also moving away. When they were finally alone, the community exploded in celebration. Children ran out of the houses, women sang, men clapped, and the drums sounded again across the slope. "We did it," Maya said, hugging Emily. "We really did it." "Yes," Emily replied, looking at Lakota, who was holding River with an expression of admiration and love. "We did." Elder Sarah approached them, her face shining with satisfaction. "Official welcome to the family," she said to Emily. "And welcome to the world, little warrior," she added, touching River's head. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Now," Lakota said, putting his arm around her. "Now we build our life. Together. It won't be easy," Elder Sarah warned. "Your father won't completely give up. He'll try other forms of pressure, other ways to separate you." "Let him try," Emily said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'm no longer the frightened girl who fled in the rain. I'm a mother now. I'm a fighter, and I won't let anyone destroy my family." 6 months later, Emily was sitting on the porch of the house she and Lakota had built in the community, watching River play on the floor with wooden toys made by local artisans. The baby had grown strong and healthy, his blue eyes shining with curiosity and joy. Lakota arrived home from work at the agricultural cooperative the community had established, his muscles defined by the sun and honest work. He kissed Emily and picked up River, making the baby laugh with his playfulness. "How was your day?" Emily asked. "Good. The harvest is better than we expected." "And you? How was the meeting with the lawyer?" "Good too. The shared custody papers are almost ready." "And there's news." "What news?" Emily smiled, one hand instinctively going to her belly. "River is going to have a little brother or sister." Lakota looked at her, surprised. Then a huge smile spread across his face. He kissed her passionately, holding River with one arm and her with the other. "Another warrior for our family," he said, his voice laden with emotion. "Or a warrior princess," Emily corrected. "Elder Sarah thinks it's going to be a girl this time. Whatever it is, it will be loved," Lakota said. "Completely, unconditionally loved." Emily looked around, at the community that had become her home, at the children playing in the red earth, at the women talking while preparing dinner, at the men returning from work with tired but satisfied smiles. It was a simple life, but it was her life. It was a life she had chosen, a life built on love and dignity. And as the sun set over Red Ridge that night, tinging the sky gold and red, Emily knew she had made the right decision. Love had won, and it would continue to win, one day at a time, forever.